Shalom Aleichem, good morning. Welcome to those who are coming back from Chutz La'aretz. It's good to have you back. I want to dedicate the shir to the Halachah of Ben Zion Ben Dosa, him and his family. Today we'll speak about Parshas Shemois and Inyane de Yoima. Everybody wants to speak about the hostage deal. Is it a good idea, not a good idea? Prisoners exchange in Halachah.
What deal?
So first we'll start with Parshas Shemois, beginning of the Parsha of Bnei Yisrael. Paru ve'ishatzu ve'yabu ve'ya'atnu bim'od me'od. They multiplied, they increased in numbers. So much so that the Medrash says, Medrash Abba in Shemois Saba, Parsha Aleph or Yisrael, Rashi brings it, sextuplets, 6 in one shot. The Oznaim LaTorah says that somebody came, one of the Maskilim, came to his father-in-law, Rabbi Lezer Gordon, the Rosh Yeshiva tells, and he said to him, Rebbe, I believe in the words of the Torah, but the words of Chazal, 6 in one shot? Everyone in Klal Yisrael, all the women? That sounds a little exaggerated. Now I believe they increased the numbers in an unnatural way. That's clear to me, because they came down to Mitzrayim, only 70 people. They left, the Torah says, 600,000. After being there enslaved for 210 years, if it's a natural progression, they should leave with 1,200, maybe 1,500. So if they went up to crazy numbers like 600,000 in 210 years, obviously something happened. But 6 in one shot, how is that possible? I don't believe in it. So Belezer Gordon Zatzal told him, what you believe is only the written words. Whatever the Torah says, I'll give you a proof from what the Torah says that you can't refute. How many firstborns were there in Mitzrayim? Sefer Bamidbar, the Torah counts them, 22,000 and change. At the same time, the Torah says there's 600,000 men from the age of 20 to the age of 60. So you have to assume there's a lot of little kids under the age of 20, there's a lot of old people above the age of 60. Mistama, it's double that. So if you have 600,000 from the age of 20 to 60, you have probably another 600,000 from the age of 60 and up and 20 and down. That's 1.2 million Jewish people. And what about the women? You have to double that. So Mistama, you have about 2.4 million Jewish people leaving Mitzrayim, and you only have 22,000 firstborns, 22,000 and a few hundreds. How is that possible? Comes out that even according to normal Peru Revu of our time, this is very strange. So he says to him, a normal family, more or less, has, let's say 5 kids. You have 22,000 firstborns on 1.2 million, we're only counting the men. The Torah only counts the firstborn men, the boys, the males, not the girls. 1.2 million males. We have the 600,000 from 20 to 60. You have under 20 and above 60, that's about 1.2. If you have 1.2 million and you have about 5 kids per family, you should have 250,000 firstborns. How is it possible you only have 22,000? Since Moshe Rabbeinu wrote the chapter 90 in Tehillim, Tfilah LeMoshe, and there he testifies that people live for 70 to 80 years. Yemei shnoseinu bahem, shivim, ve'im b'gvuros, shmoinim shana. So how many times can a lady get pregnant in that short life? 10 times. If you have 22,000 and change firstborns, and you have 1.2 million, so you have to divide 1.2 million by 22,000, and you have about 55 births. That means each one gave birth, if only 9 or 10 times she gets pregnant in her lifetime, that means about 6 times, 6 kids in one shot, just like Chazal said. Says the Oznaim LaTorah, it's a mitzvah to be mefarsem davar zeh, so that's what I'm trying to do. Rabbi Klal Yisrael stayed in Eretz Yisrael, in Mitzrayim, enslaved for many years, 210 years. Why did they have to stay there for so long? Why so long?
It's a good place to be.
Big Chiddush in the Zohar HaKodesh in Shemois, Daf Gimel Amud Aleph. Rabbi says, the pasuk in Mishle says, Al tilcha mes'ein ayin etra ayin. When you benefit from a bad person, you take his bread, it's not kedai, not to eat from it, and not from benefit from a bad person. Listen to the language of the Zohar. Ve'im ksheyardu Yisrael leMitzrayim. And if, when Klal Yisrael went down to Mitzrayim, they wouldn't taste from the bread of the Egyptians, they wouldn't stay there for so long, and they wouldn't be able to do anything bad to them. They would not be able to harm them. That's the language of the Zohar. So why did they stay there so long? They ate the Egyptian bread. Chiddush.
That's why we eat the bread in Chutzlaritz.
Make sure it's not from a bad person. That's what the pasuk in Mishle says. Vayiki yahu hameyaldos es Elokim vayas lahem batim. Shifra and Pua revive the kids, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu rewards them with Bate Kehuna, Levia, and Malchus. Why? Because they didn't listen to Paro and they didn't kill the babies. Wow! What tzadikois! Wow! They weren't murderers. Shkoyach. What's the big deal? I mean, it's impressive, but not such a big deal, because if they did listen to Paro's decree, we would call them murderers. If Hitler commands everybody should kill their own kids, would people do it? Of course not. So what's the big revusa? What's the big deal that they actually didn't listen to Paro? So they didn't kill, so they're not murderers. Oh, you're not a murderer, so you get a big reward. Malchus, Kehuna, Levia from you. Why? There's many people who don't kill, but they actually would like to. So why don't they? All kinds of reasons. They don't want to get caught. What will people say? I'm not going to get a alif in a shlishi, aliyah in the shul. My conscience. Maybe somebody's going to take revenge. There's softies. There's many reasons why people don't kill. On the other hand, there are many people who save lives. Why? Kavod, money, prestige, fortune, fame. It feels good. Gives me satisfaction. All these may be good reasons. But that's not the claim to fame of the Meyaldos. What does the pasuk says? Vayehi ki yaru hameyaldos es Elokim, because they had yiras shamayim, they had yiras Elokim. They decided not to kill, not because Paro said, not because it feels good, not because I'm a softie, not because I'm afraid somebody's going to take revenge, just because HaKadosh Baruch Hu says this is not the thing to do. Take all the reasons in the world to do or not to do something. That's great. But the main reason that should pave our path throughout the day, all day long, every single day, is what is Ratzon Hashem. What does the HaKadosh Baruch Hu want from me now? And when you do that, and whatever you do is for that reason alone, that's Yiras Elokim. And for that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu rewards. So that should be the main thing that we focus on. What does HaKadosh Baruch Hu want from me? Not because it looks good, it doesn't look good, makes me feel good, or it doesn't. It's insignificant. It's only about Yiras Shamayim. ויגדל הילד ותביאהו לבס פרוי וילה לבן ותקרא שמוי מוישה. Why? ותאמר כי מן המים משיסיהו. What does that mean? And she called him Moshe. You know why? Because they pulled him from the water. Some explain. If she pulled him from the water, let's look at the word water. Mem, Yud, Mem. If you count the letters leading to Mem, that means Aleph plus Beis plus Gimel plus Dalet, 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4, all the way to Mem, that's 145.
Including that?
Yeah. If you count the letters leading to Yud, 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4, that's 55. And we have another Mem, Mahim, another 145. How much is 145 plus 145? That's 300 plus 55, that's 345? That's Moshe. That's what she said. Kimin hamayim, from the letters of mayim, the letters of water, I pulled him. I pulled his name. That's why I called him Moshe, because I got his name from the water. Moshe is born. Vayelech ish mi beis Levi. Who is he? Don't know. Shh, secret. Don't say his name. Vayikach, and he married. Whom did he marry? Bas Levi. What's her name? Vatar Haisha, and she was pregnant. Vateled Ben. Don't say who it is. What's the big secret? Next parsha, Perek Vav and Vayera, the Torah says, Vayikach Amram. Oh, so you know his name. Et Yocheved. And Vateled Lo es Aaron Ves Moshe. So we know all the names. But now you're hiding it. Inconsistent.
Same thing with Pinchas and Zimri. They tell you have to end the parsha.
So let's start it here. This two chumashim before. If you want to tell me the name, share the name. If you don't, so be consistent and don't. How come here when he's born, not his name and not his parents' name? But later on, yeah, his father, his mother, we know the names. We know him, we know his brother. Says Moshe, when a baby is born, he's a sack of potential. He's a box full of skills and abilities, but we have no idea what he's going to do with them. Don't count on yichus. If the Torah would say, Vayikach Amram et Yocheved, here in our pasuk we would say, wow, Amram and Yocheved, what do you expect? Shabbos Nun Hey, the Gemara says, Amram is one of the 4 people who never sinned. Never sinned. And the only reason he died is because people were not going to live forever because of the Nachash. Tzaddik Gamur. So if you know he marries a tzaddik like Yocheved, you understand this kid is going to be unbelievable. So it's like, no brainer. And how can I become great like Moshe? I don't have parents like Amram and Yocheved. So Torah says it has nothing to do with the yichus. Don't count on yichus. Moshe, you have a lot of potential. You have great parents. You have your set of skills and abilities, but let's see what you do with them. And after Moshe works on himself and becomes the Moshe that he is because he did it to himself, the Torah says, okay, so Nat will tell you his name is Moshe. And by the way, you know who his parents were? Amram and Yocheved. But it's not because of Amram and Yocheved that he became so great. It's because he decided to be great. And he used his Bechira Chofshis to use and channel his potential to the right way. In other words, one can never assume, if I have great parents, or the reverse. If I don't, well, I don't stand a chance. It has nothing to do with that. Great people came from terrible yichus, and terrible people came from great yichus. The Torah hides the names of the parents, so we won't make that mistake to rely on the yichus and say, well, from this house for sure you're going to get a Moshe Rabbeinu. No, not necessarily so. You see it from Yishmael, who had great father. Her great father is an Avraham Avinu. You see from Esav, we had a Yitzhak and Rivka, but he decided to be an Esav. And Yitzhak decided to be a Yitzhak. Bechira Chofshis. The Gemara says something similar. In Menachos Mem Nun Gimel. The Gemara tells us a story about Reb Freda. Reb Freda was sitting at home. Somebody's knocking. So the Gabbai goes to open the door. And he runs back to Reb Freda and says, Reb Freda, you know who's there? His name is Ezra. Ezra bar of Tilmus. And he is the great-grandson, 10th generation to Belazar ben Azariah, who's 10th generation to Ezra HaSofer. And he wants to come in. And Reb Freda says, what are you getting so excited? What are you getting so excited about his yichus? If he's a Bar Urian, if he's a Ben Torah, yay, great, bring him in. If he's a Ben Torah, and he has all this yichus going all the way back to Ezra, gewaldig, great. But if all he has is the yichus, and he's the 10th generation to Ezra, but that's where it stops, let it be consumed in fire. And the yichus works against him. Because if you have such a great grandfather, and you don't walk in his path, so he's looking from above, he says, what are you doing? You're making me look bad. It works against you. So yichus is great, but only if you continue in the same path. But the greatest thing to do is to create our own yichus for our grandchildren, that they should be able to be proud and say, you know who my grandfather was? And that's how really yichus works, because everybody has bechira chofshis. If there's one thing that we have to rely on yichus, is to create our own.
Can we say there's enough reason why they might have given initially the names of the parents? Because the actual marriage was against the Torah. It was the marriage of Ant and
Is there a Torah at that time?
No, but we're saying the apostolic kept the Torah.
And did Yaakov Avinu, when he married 2 sisters, the Torah hides it? Bedarkei Avos, and Two halakim, I think, have 30 different answers from Rishonim and Achronim. How is it possible that Yaakov Avinu married two sisters, and many answers about Amram as well.
Further on, though, they tell us that they're married. Right?
What's that?
But further on, the Torah tells us that they were married.
Next week, Parshas Vayera, Perek Vav. Boy Yisai, listen to a shayla. A ma'aseh that happened. You know, unfortunately, sometimes people have children, and for whatever reason, it's too difficult for them to raise their children. They're too poor, the child is too noisy. For whatever reason, they just drop them off at the entrance of a hospital. Unfortunately, it happens all over the world many times. This ma'aseh is similar, but not exactly. There's a very poor lady who was pregnant. She's about to give birth. So she goes to the hospital, and she registered under a different name. She gave birth and left the hospital, leaving the baby in the hospital. The hospital needs a nursing lady. So they advertise that they're looking for a lady to do this, and they're going to pay. She reads the ad. She says, great. She goes back to the hospital under her real name this time, so they won't know it's her son. And she starts nursing this baby, and they pay her. Now it comes time to do a little introspection, and she asks, is this okay? Am I allowed to do this? Am I allowed to get money from the hospital for nursing my own son, or is that considered stealing? Shimuna Rabbi Yisai Dayan Mumchim. What do you say? Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol nהיה bidvorei.
Amen. She's allowed to do it.
Allowed to do it. And why not? If the hospital would know that they're actually paying her, his own mother, that anyways would like to nurse her baby, would the hospital say this is great? Or the hospital will say, Mekach taus, cancel the deal? Oh, maybe that's the reason we're asking this week. Could be. Has to do with Yocheved. What happened with Yocheved? She got paid to nurse her own son. So Lichoira, we can bring a proof from Yocheved that this is kosher, because if it wouldn't be kosher, obviously she wouldn't do it. She was a big tzaddikus.
But Yocheved, the Batya didn't know Yocheved was the mother?
Did Batya know?
I thought she knew.
What does the pasuk say? ותאמר לבס פרעה, הליכי אס הילד הזה והניקיהו לי, ואני אתן את שכרך. Seemingly she doesn't know. She knows. She doesn't know. And she's willing to pay. Licheoira, if Yocheved would think this is wrong and it's stealing, she wouldn't do it. But maybe we cannot use this as a proof. Because maybe Yocheved didn't take compensation, didn't charge. Batya decided to give her. But there's a Medrash Rabbah against this. The language of the Medrash Rabbah, Parsha Aleph Ois Kaf Hei. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Tzadikim, not only did I give them back their lost item, I even pay them their reward, their compensation. Not only did I give back Yocheved her lost item, Moshe, her baby, I even gave her sachar. So lichora, that's her salary. She works as if, and she gets paid to nurse her own baby.
No, but maybe there's a difference. She would not have given the child in Yocheved she wanted. It's just the circumstances. Said
this lady is poor. She can't raise him. She says, I can't.
Yeah, but it's her decision.
But the question is on the hospital. If the hospital would know this is what's going on, would they say, okay, that's fine. We just need somebody who would pay you. But anyways, you want to nurse your own baby, so why would I pay you?
Is this not a question of Gnevas Das?
Gnevas das, Gnevas mammon. But maybe we can understand what Yocheved is doing based on Ha'amek Davar. The Ha'amek Davar says, the pasuk says here that the daughter of Paro says, "Va'ani eten et scharech." It doesn't say that Yocheved comes and says, "I want a certain salary." Eten is from language of netina, from matana. She decided to give her a gift. Why? Because she's a king. I don't know if you happen to be friendly with any king. You know some kings. If you invite a king to your son's bar mitzvah, do you think he comes and he gives you a, 25 shekels Sefer HaChinuch from Or HaChaim or Yefenov? That's embarrassing. You think he gives you a set of Dirshu Mishnah Brura? It's embarrassing. If he leaves the bar mitzvah without giving you $100,000, it's not a king. It's embarrassing. The king pays handsomely. He's a king. So when the daughter of Paro sees something going on, I have to pay you for this. How much? She didn't get a regular wage as a nursing lady. She's a king. She pays totally different. So we made it, this is very different than our case with a hospital, because the hospital, it's a business deal. I need somebody to do this service for me, and I pay like the going rate in the market. But a king pays differently. The language is vani etin lach, from the language of netina. Netina is a matana. But the chida, differently. He says, why is it that the daughter of Paro decided to give Yocheved extra money? After all, it's the mother. Because the daughter of Paro says to Yocheved, listen, he's growing up in a palace. I want him to have top-notch food. I don't know what you can afford, but I want you to have every single night a steak dinner. Every single morning, I want you to have the best foods possible. So she paid her because she is going to do something extra. Because he is growing in a palace. He's going to be raised as a king. And that's why she paid her. We made it back to our question, when the hospital is not doing that, and the hospital is not the palace, this lady who's doing this is stealing from the hospital. Because if the hospital would know, they would say, Mekach taus, we do not want to pay the mother of this baby, because anyway she would like to nurse her own baby. So that would be a problem. Moshe Rabbeinu is in the desert, miles and miles away from the city. No one is around, quiet, and some sheep. And suddenly, Moshe! Moshe! So he comes close, he sees the burning bush. Moshe! And this is where HaKadosh Baruch Hu appoints him to be the leader of Klal Yisrael. Isn't there maybe a little more fitting place for this? You're going to be appointed to be the leader of Klal Yisrael, the one who's going to deliver the Torah. Where? With some sand around, zero water, and some nice, cute sheep. This is the place in the desert? Says the Chofetz Chaim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him, Shal na'alecha me'al raglecha. Take your shoes off. Ki hamakom asher ata oimed alav admas koideshu. Where you're standing is an admas koidesh. In other words, it's not the place that makes the mensch. It's the mensch that makes the place. You can make any place admas kodesh. You can sanctify any place. All you need to do is shal nalecha. Take those shoes off. That thing that makes you a little heavy, slows you down. That barrier that you have between you and connecting to where you're standing. People sometimes ask, from where I'm standing, from where I am, how can I become great? How can I elevate myself? And that's what the Kodesh Baruch Hu taught Moshe. Ki hamakom asher ata oimed alav. It doesn't make a difference where you're standing. That makom that you are standing in right now can turn into admas kodesh. It's up to us. Any place, anywhere that we are, can turn into admas kodesh, and it's only dependent on us. Riddle of the week. Moshe does all kinds of nisim. He throws the staff down, and it turns into a snake. He puts his hand, takes it out of his jacket, and suddenly it's all white and tzarat. Was there anyone who did this trick before Moshe Rabbeinu?
The snake or the tzara? Or both?
Both.
Both.
Can there be somebody who came before Moshe and does these things? Not everybody together. Big chiddush, gigantic chiddush. Medrash Agadol, Perek Daled, Ois Lamed, Pasuk Lamed. The pasuk says, "Vayas ha'oisois le'einei ha'am." He does these signs in front of the nations. What is the word ha'oisos? That letter hey hayedia. The signs. Why can't you say Vayas oisos le'einei ha'am? Says the Medrash. Last week's parsha. פרק מ"ט פסוק א' האספו והגיד לכם אשר יקרא אתכם באחיס הים. Yaakov Avinu gathers everybody and says, come, I'll tell you what's going to happen with you. What did he tell them? Says the Medrash, Yaakov Avinu did exactly the same thing. He took his stick, he threw it down and turned into a snake. Then he grabbed it again, became a stick. He put his hand in his jacket, took it out, it was white. He put it back, it's fine. And he said to his children, listen, you're going to be enslaved in Mitzrayim for many years. Somebody will come and will claim, I'm the savior, come follow me. If you do, the Egyptians will kill you. You have to wait until someone will come and show you these exact signs. When you see these two signs, then you'll know he is the real deal. That's why the Pasuk says, Vayas ha-oisois. The signs. Which signs? The signs that they familiar with, that they saw, that they once saw they witnessed by Yaakov Avinu. These same signs Moshe did to the nations, and that's why they believed him, and that's why they're willing to follow him. Because they remembered, oh, that's what Yaakov Avinu said, that's what he was talking about. So that's the signs we are allowed to believe. That's why we believe you. Tremendous Chiddush.
Who did he hand it to Yaakov? Yosef?
They had a tradition that Yaakov Avinu showed us the signs, and these are the two signs that we have to see. If you don't see these signs, don't believe him. It's a Mashiach Sheker. Let's talk about prisoners exchange. It's on everyone's mind. Normal procedure in the last, who knows how many years, is that Israel releases hundreds of terrorists, many times with blood on their hands, in order to receive 1, 2, 3 prisoners, and that's what seems to is going to happen in the next few days. And the question is this kosher? Is this halachically acceptable? How do we view this?
So over the generations, when people were kidnapped, the Gedolim always said, "Don't ransom them."
Who's the Gedolim that always said this?
They were
Who?
over the generations.
Soon we'll see. Soon we'll see.
I think they say not to give too much.
What's that?
Not to give too much.
What's too much?
No, I think the Dolay says.
Let's see. Shulchan Aruch Yoredea, Simen Reish Nun Beis. The halachos of Pidyon Shvuim. It's in Hilchos Tzedakah. And in Hilchos Tzedakah, we learn there's all kinds of prioritizations and ingredients for the right recipe to make the best investment with your money. Who should be the recipient? An ani, the shul, hachnasa skala, many different good causes we're all familiar with. They come every morning in the shul, and mistama you see them, everybody has his own cause, and they're all great. What's the right order of giving? What's the level of how needy a person is? He needs clothes, he needs a job, he needs a new car. Who is the ani? Aniyei ircha, before the poor people of a different city, aniyim of Eretz Yisrael. So we have many, it's very complex halachos to create the right prioritization. But, says the Shulchan Aruch, he copies the Rambam, Pidyon Shvuim tops the list. Pidyon Shvuim is right up there and very simple. One who is kidnapped is totally dependent on his kidnappers, and normally there's an element of pikuach nefesh. You see, Avraham Avinu, he took 318 soldiers to try and release one person, to try and release Lot, his nephew. So the source of this sugya is in a Mishnah in Gittin, Daf Mem Hei Amud Aleph, and the Mishnah says there's all kinds of institutions. Chazal were made takanos, the tikkun oilam, and one of them is en poidin es hashvuim yeser al kedei demehen. You don't pay too much to redeem hostages. The question is, what is too much? And poidin es hashvuim yeser al kedei demehen. So in the past, where there was a value attached to a person, when people were used to be sold, you know exactly what the value of a person is, and if they charge too much, so you don't do that. But what do you do today? Normally, most places they don't sell people. So the Maharam Lublin, more than 400 years ago, Siman Tezvav already deals with this, and he says, you have to assess if this person was a slave, how much he would be sold for. The Radbaz says, look at other nations and estimate what they would do, or look what they give in order to release their prisoners, and that is the normal going rate in the market, and based on that is what you have to do. Not more than that, and poitin mesashvuim yeser al kedei demen. But what's the reason for this halacha? This is halacha quoted in the Mishnah. What's the reason? The Gemara gives two possible reasons. Either duchka de tzibur, we don't want to burden the public's fund, or de lo leisu veligrivu tfei, not to encourage further kidnappings. What's the difference? What the reason is? We know the halacha. The halacha is you're not allowed to release for more than they're worth. But what's the difference? What the reason is? The nafkamina is private money. If the reason is not to burden the public's fund, and you have the daughter of Gil Bates, that's his name after he converts, remember? Instead of Bill Gates, he becomes a Gil Bates. It sounds much more Jewish. So if his daughter is kidnapped, he can release her with as much money as he wants, and he doesn't burden the public's fund. So private money can release a relative, and it's not going to cause any problem with the tzibur. But if the reason is not to encourage further kidnapping, it doesn't make a difference how much money you have, you can't release. So the Gemara tries to bring a proof from Levi Bar Darga. His daughter was kidnapped, and he released her for 13,000 gold coins, exorbitant amount. So you see that Levi Bar Darga held that the reason is not to burden the public's fund. But this is my private money, so it's not going to affect the tzibur. Mimele, he released her for 13,000 gold coins. But the Abaye comes and says, Mi amar di birtzon chachamim asaken. Who says it's the right thing? Maybe Levi Bar Darga held like this, but chachamim didn't agree. This is what he did for his relative. His daughter, he released her, but who says that was the right thing to do? So Lemaise, this is called a baya de lo ifsheta in the Gemara. There's a question in the Gemara. What the reason for the halacha is? We don't know. The Gemara leaves it with a question mark. We don't know the reason, but we do know the halacha. The halacha is, you don't release the prisoner for more than he is worth. In our case, there is no duchka de tzibura. There is no burdening the public's fund for two reasons. First of all, it's not a local community. It's the government. It's not a problem. But more than that, when we release hundreds of terrorists that we have, it's actually making it easier for us. If the problem is money, we're making it easier for us. We don't need the manpower watching over them. We don't need to feed them. We don't need the facility to hold them. So, if the reason is duchka de tzibura, it doesn't apply in our case. So this is a baya de lo ifsheta. We don't know the reason, so we can't apply the reason and say, well, in our case, this doesn't apply because the halacha stands. The Rambam in Matnos Anim, Perek Ches Halacha Yud Beis, and the Rif as well, they both paskin that the reason is the second reason. The lo ligavu veleisu tfei, that they shouldn't come and do this again and again. They say it's a great business. We kidnap one or two or three or whatever we can, and we charge for whatever we charge, releasing people or money. And it works, they pay us. So that's going to encourage further kidnapping. In order to prevent that, the Rambam and the Rif decided the halacha is like the second reason. And this is a chumrah. Why is this a chumrah? Because it prevents private money to release their own relatives. So this is a chumrah. 3 dapim later, we started with Memhei Amud Aleph in the Mishnah. 3 dapim later in the Gemara, Memches Amud Aleph, we learn a story. Rabbi Yeshua ben Hanania once came to Rome, and they told him there's a kid here with something special. He is in the Roman prison, and he is something. Go visit him. Yeah, you'll see something out of this room. He goes and he stands at the entrance of the jail, and he tests this kid. He says a half a pasuk from Yeshaya, and the kid completes the pasuk, and he is so impressed, and he says, "Muftach ani sheyeh moireh hoira b'Yisrael." This kid is going to be one of Gedolei Yisrael, and he made a shavua. I'm not moving from here until I release him, no matter what is the price that they will charge. It doesn't make a difference. Ha'avoida, it's the language of Shavua. Eini zaz mikan, ad she'evdenu b'chol mamon. I will pay anything they want. And that's what happened. Says Gemara, who is this? Who was this kid? Rabbi Shmuel ben Elisha, Kohen Gadol. He was right. But the Tosfos asks, how was he able to do this? Just 3 dapim before we learn, and poidim es hashvuim yesel kedei demed. You can't release for more than one's worth. So how was he able to do this? The Tosfos answers,
you worth more than one person.
if the going rate is 100 shekels and you give $1 million, that's more than his worth. It's according to the going rate, not according to Gedolei Yisrael. The Tosfos gives 2 answers. Either because a person who is muflag bechokhma, he is going to be one of the Gedolim, or he is already a Gadol, this halacha doesn't apply to him. You can do whatever you need in order to release him. Or because every time one is in jail, there's a pikuach nefesh element. But in the Roman jail, there was an eminent, clear pikuach nefesh situation, and when that happens, this halacha is not relevant. The Maharshal says this Tosfos is la halacha, which means the halacha is that when you have a clear and present pikuach nefesh situation, this halacha does not apply. So back to our case, it is clear to all that it's a major pikuach nefesh shaila for our hostages. So if you want to introduce this halachah that says you can't release for more than is worth, based on the mashal, it's not relevant at all. The Rabbi says, a great chiddush. He says we see people releasing all the time, people more than they're worth. How are they able to do it? He offers 4 different reasons why people do it. One of the reasons, he says, because sometimes in jail, they force a person to transgress the Torah. So you're not releasing the person. You're releasing the religion and the Torah itself. Poidim es hadas. That's his language. You're releasing Yiddishkeit itself. You're not releasing the person, you're releasing Yiddishkeit itself. He says how much more so when it's done to little kids who are taught in jail to do the wrong thing. They're going to grow up, they're not going to have any recollection of what Yiddishkeit is all about. You're mamish releasing from captivity HaKadosh Baruch Hu itself as if. That's a tremendous chiddush. So what you mentioned before is Gdolei Yisrael. Mistama, you're referring to Maharam Yerutenberg. Maharam Yerutenberg was one of the last Baalei HaTosfos. He's mentioned 12 times in Tosfos throughout Shas. His Talmidim, the Rosh, the Mordechai, the Tashbetz, greatest people. He lived in Germany under King Rudolf I. And at that time in Germany, the citizens of the country were actually considered slaves to the country. So you can't leave. And somebody said to the king that the Maharam Yerutenberg is planning to leave the country, and not only that, he's planning to leave to Eretz Yisrael. Very, very severe. So they put him in jail. His Talmid, the Rosh, gathered an unbelievable amount of money amassed from everybody in order to release him, and they were willing to do this. But the Maharam Yerutenberg said, leave me here. Because if you're going to do this, they're going to continue doing this, and they're going to see it's worth it, it's a great business to be in, and they're going to kidnap all the Rabbanim. So he said, I want to stay here. They didn't let him learn. At one point, he davened to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and for some reason they allowed, and they brought in some parchment and some ink, and he started writing, and we have a lot of his writings from what he wrote, the tshuvas that he wrote when he was in jail. At one point they allowed his Talmid, the Tashbetz, to go in and learn with him. But he didn't have a Sefer Torah to learn from. He davened to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And from Shamayim, they gave him one of the 13 Sifrei Torah that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote on the day that he died. This Sefer Torah is still here. It's in the Altenoi Shul in Prague. They still have it. It's mamish an amazing thing. So this is going back, the Maharam Yerutenberg, I believe, was born, Goyish account, 1215, and died 1293. He died in prison. He was there for the last 7 years of his life. The Rosh wanted to release him, but he didn't accept this. And this could be a Midas Chasidus. After he died, they wanted to charge a lot to release his body. It took 14 years that he stayed. His body was in jail. And there was a man, I think the name was Alexander Whitman. And he said, I'll release him for that price, but I want to have the schus to be buried next to him. And that's what happened. He released him, he gave him all the money, and he had the schus to be buried next to the Maharam Yerutenberg. So this lichoira is a midas chasidus. The Maharam Yerutenberg, according to the Tosfos, can definitely be released. He's a muflag b'chokhmah, he's Godol Hador. According to the Maharshal, if there's a pikuach nefesh, this is not relevant at all. According to the Radbaz, everybody does it for various reasons. Lichoira, it's not relevant, but he was noyeg midas chasidus be'atzmo.
Pikuach nefesh, in this case of today, it's a safek future, in fact, less than safek future pikuach nefesh. So Let's see. To us, there's a clear, eminent pikuach nefesh to the hostages, no question. So lichoira, this halacha is not relevant. On the other hand, you have 3 potential problems. When releasing the terrorists, again, you're causing pikuach nefesh to everybody around. And more than that, you're causing a pikuach nefesh to a greater number of people. Right now they have close to 100 hostages. Some of them are not alive. But when releasing hundreds of prisoners, you're going to create potential pikuach nefesh to a greater number of people that until now, as if we're not in harm's way. And more, you have to assume that if the young people over there in Hamas see this is a worthwhile investment, so they will join and become terrorists as well. This is great. The Mishnah that we quoted
is talking about different times. When people were kidnapped, not as a political bargaining chip, but to become a slave. They would kidnap a person, they would sell him to be a slave, or you release him for whatever money you can. Today it's a totally different ballgame. Today it's Dinei Milchama. And the Mishnah is not talking about it. The Shulchan Aruch doesn't discuss Dinei Milchama. And you have to assume that in Dinei Milchama, everything is different. And not less important is to take into account the morale of the soldiers. When a soldier goes to war, and he knows that Israel will stop at nothing to release him, his motivation is all the way up there. But when he knows that he goes to fight for the country, but not necessarily that he's going to come back, alive or dead, his motivation is not so high. And it's imperative that all soldiers go with 100% excitement, enthusiasm, 100% motivation to go all out, no matter what, because they know we will stop at nothing to bring them back. So there's a lot of missing information that we have in order to know everything, to be able to assess if this is a good deal or not. On the surface, it sounds like a terrible deal. But since this halachah is not relevant, it's a great deal. Why? Ovadia, I think it was 40 years ago or so, the Entebbe, on the plane was taken. Rabbi Kutner was one of the people who was taken there. He wrote a tshuva. When you have a suffix and you have a vadai, the rule is we go with the vadai. They wanted to release a lot of Palestinians, and that's the reason they hijacked the plane. Baruch Hashem, Israel was able to go in and release the people.
The Entebbe wasn't the Rav Hutner one. Rav Hutner was September of 1970.
Okay, sorry, thank you for that. So Avadia wrote the following. You have a vadai sakana to the hostages. You have many sfekus regarding those whom you're going to release. What are the sfekus? Maybe they're going to do tshuva. Hard to imagine. I don't know if tshuva, but maybe they had enough. They suffered enough in the Israeli jail. They don't want to go there again. Suffolk. Maybe they will go back, trying to go back to terror activity, but maybe they won't be successful. Maybe we will kill them. Maybe they will be caught again by us. Maybe they're going to have an accident on the way. It happened many, many times. The terrorist tries to put a bomb somewhere and he himself explodes. It happens so many times. So these are many sfekus. I don't need to combine sfekus, but it's a suffix. When you have a suffix and you have a vadai, you go with a vadai. You have a certainty and you have a doubt, you go with a certainty. And the certainty is that you have pikuach nefesh in front of you, and therefore you have to release. And of course there's got to be a limit. You can't release 50,000 people or 100,000 people for one person. But the rule is that we normally listen to the experts in any area. For example, we learn that we listen to a doctor. And the doctor tells us to violate Shabbos for the patient. The doctor tells us that the patient has to eat on Yom Kippur. Even though it's skila for Shabbos, it's skaris for Yom Kippur, we listen to the professional, we listen to the doctor. And that's how it is in all professions. We listen to the experts. If the security officials, and we know there's a lot of politics involved, but if the security officials, and again, as I said before, psychologists will explain to us exactly what it does to the morale of the soldiers. If the experts think this is a good deal, because we have the pikuach nefesh, a very, very clear one to our hostages, because we have the Mishnah, which is not relevant in this case, as we said, lichoira, this is not a good deal. This is a deal we, with a lot of tears in our eyes, should accept. Fascinating shaila. Sha'ar Yosef. Sha'ar Yosef is the Chidah. One of his Sfarim, Sha'ar Yosef, in Horius Yud Gimel Amud Aleph, he asks a question. A father, a rabbi, and a mother were caught. Reuven's father, Reuven's rabbi, and Reuven's mother are in jail. They're demanding 1,000 gold coins to release the father and rabbi together, or 1,000 gold coins to release the mother. Reuven only has 1,000 gold coins. Whom should he release? The father and his rabbi, they go together, package deal, or the mother. Each one is 1,000, but he only has 1,000. So he can only release the mother or the father and the rabbi. Rabbi say, what do you say?
The mother.
What's that?
The mother.
Why the mother?
Because it's a big zilzal for her to be.
So in Hilchos Tzedakah we learn that when you have a guy and a lady, you release the lady because it's more busha for her. But that's when you have 1 and 1. Here you have 2. It's many more mitzvahs in the world. Why do you prefer 1 over 2? What's that? That's his father and his Rebbe. His Rebbe brings him l'chayei olam habo. So his Rebbe comes before the father if the father is not his teacher. Great. But the father and teacher are in one place, the mother is standing alone. What do you want to prioritize when it's the mother against the rabbi? The rabbi and the father. Why? The mother has the advantage that she is a lady, and as a lady she has more busha. The rabbi has the advantage that he's the rabbi, and is also with the father, so it's 2 people, there's many, many more mitzvahs in the world.
Whose blood is redder? There are 2 people versus 1 person.
So you're saying, let's go to the lab and find out whose blood is redder, and we'll decide. And if the blood, it's a Shabbos and they're not working, what do you do then? We have to decide right now. What do you do? Who do you want to release?
The father and the rabbi.
Why?
Because they bring him to the world to come.
And she doesn't bring him? She taught him Moide Ani. And he was 2 years old. Torah tziva lanu Moshe, she's the one who taught him. Says the Chidah, a great Chiddush. He says, release the mother. Why? The Chiddush in what he says is Medayek from a Tosefta in Hoyos, Perek Beis, Mishnah Hey. The Tosefta says, listen to a language of the Tosefta. Hu ve'rabo ve'aviv b'shevi. He himself is in captivity together with his father and his rabbi. Says the Tosefta. Hu koidim le'rabo. He comes first. Why? Chayecha koidim. You have to release yourself first. Ve'rabo koidim le'aviv. His rabbi comes before his father. If the father is not his rabbi as well, is not his teacher, because, as we said, the rabbi brings him l'chayei olam habo, and his father only brings him to this world. Ve'imo kodemet lechol adam, and his mother comes before anyone. The language of the Shulchan Aruch is ve'imo kodemet lekulam. Says the Chidah, the order here is wrong. If his mother comes first, she should be the first on the list. You should have said like this: you come first. Your mother comes first before your rabbi. Your rabbi comes before your father. Why does it say your rabbi comes first, your father comes second, and your mother comes before anyone? Says the Chidah, because the Chiddush here is that the mother comes even before the first 2. Even when they're together. That's a tremendous diuk. It's very, very fitting according to the language of the Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch says, Ve'ima kodemet lekulam, meaning even more than one person. But that's the language of the Tosefta, and a tremendous Chiddush, I think, from the Chidah. Again, you see from here that sometimes the Halachah, 1-on-1, is not necessarily relevant. You're willing to release 1 woman, even though you're going to keep in prison 2 men. More mitzvahs, more mekudash, and yet. Ben Ish Chai, in his Sefer Od Yosef Chai, Chelek Beis.
It's still Chayecha Koidmin, no?
Chayecha Koidmin.
Before the mother.
Chayecha Koidmin before the mother. When this is quoted in the Halachah, Shulchan Aruch Yoredei Reish Nun Beis, this is quoted just like this, without explanation. The Shach and the Bayer Heitev and others say that the mother goes even before you, if there's no pikuach nefesh, because her zilzul and her busha is great. But if it's pikuach nefesh, chayecha koidmin, and you still go first before the mother. Ben Ish Chai in his Sefer Od Yosef Chai Chelek Beis Parshas Naso, page 10, a great chiddush. He brings from the Sefer Pada Es Avraham. That's Reb Avraham Palagi, the son of Reb Chaim Palagi, and he brings a medrash that we don't have. And he quotes a medrash that he saw in a Ksav Yad. The medrash is about Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma. Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma's 2 sons were kidnapped by a Goyish minister. And Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma went to him and he said, give me back my sons and I'll give you 100 gold coins. And the minister said, no. Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma left, and he went back home and he davened, and he davened, and he davened. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu listened. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent Malach Michael to strike this Goyish minister. And the minister gets this intestinal problem, and he's in pain. Mamish, he can't bear it. So one of his people there said, maybe it's because of that Jewish guy that came earlier who wanted to release his sons that you took, and you said to him no. He said, I don't think it has anything to do with it. Bring him back. As soon as Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma came into the room, suddenly the pain is over. And he feels great. And he says, you offered me 100 gold coins before, right? Okay, fine. Give me 100 gold coins and I'll give you back your sons. And Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma says, no, sorry, the price is now different. Now I'm only willing to give you 80. 80! Get out of here! And as soon as Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma left, the pain came back. It's unbearable, and he passed out. When he came to, he realized it's because of Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma. So he called him back. He says, okay, fine, 80. And Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma says, guess what? It's different now. Now 50. 50! And he got so upset, and again, pain is back. Because as soon as he saw Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma, the pain went away. Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma comes back, and he says to him, what do you want? He says, I want to take him for free. He says, fine. Here are your boys. Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma says, I'm not moving from here until we estimate how much money you actually owe me for enslaving my kids. And they figured out, and he got 80 gold coins from the minister, and he walked with his two sons. There's still time, that this medrash should be fulfilled with our hostages. Not only will they give him all back, they're actually going to pay us for all the pain and torture that they inflicted on them and on us. That a shir like this will only be Halachah and not lemaiseh. אחינו כל בית ישראל נשאו עם בצר ובשיב יעמוד מן בים ובין ביבש אמר כמרחם עליהם ויוציאם מצר ולבוך המפל לא ירא ומשי יבוד לגאולה אשתא בעגלו ובזמן קריב ונאמר אמן